to be talking about Survivor Season 39, Island of the Idols, Episode 3. So my name is Rachel.
And I'm Alyssa, and this episode was an episode.
Yeah, before this podcast started, Alyssa and I were talking, I feel like the episode sort of didn't touch upon a lot of things, and maybe that's because the Island of the Idols segment literally lasted until the 30-minute mark of the episode, and I just felt like we were missing out of a lot of information when we went to Tribal.
Yeah, and part of that I think might be the editing trying to make us feel blindsided as much as the player who got voted out was blindsided. But I don't know. I feel like we didn't get a very balanced story this time around.
Yeah, so starting from the top of the episode, we see the fallout from the last episode where Jamal and Jack come back to camp. And I think it was interesting. We see Jason get a confessional talking about, oh, they're willing to work for me. I think this is really good for Jason. I think Jason can come back from this and make it potentially fairly far in the game. I don't think Jason will be getting voted out anytime soon. Like we saw this episode, I think Nora could be the one if there is not a tribe swap next week. But I thought it was interesting that we see Jason getting a confessional at the top of the episode, as well as Tommy. Tommy is getting so much positive screen time. I think that is something to look out for. Alyssa and I don't necessarily follow Edgic or anything like that. So this is just from a viewer's standpoint. We've seen Tommy in the first 3 episodes, and 2 of those times his tribe has not even gone to tribal. So I think that is something to note.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of wildly oscillating. The tribe that we see is the tribe that goes to tribal council, and then we don't really see anything from the other tribe. But that isn't the truth for Tommy. So that's really interesting. I thought the fallout from voting out Molly was also interesting when you look at it from an editing standpoint. Because they showed Jamal as super pissed off, but then they made a point of showing Jack being like, dude, this was awesome. And someone was like, are you smiling? And he was like, yeah, this was great. So.
Yeah, we see Tommy and Kelly do damage control with Jack and Jamal separately. Tommy, yeah, he's getting such a good edit. Kelly didn't really talk at this point, like when we saw them all trying to do the damage control. But yeah, same with, I think Tommy did well, similar to Missy last week, doing damage control with Aaron. Jamal said he's going to forgive, but he's not going to forget, which I think that could be very problematic. If we skip down to the next vote on purple and talk about the purple tribe dynamic, since we're already here, I think even though Nora is still being Nora and we got a little bit of her quirky antics this episode, Dan says that he wants to vote Nora out and it would be the easy vote. Let's vote Nora. Nobody really cares. It won't piss anyone off kind of thing. And then Jamal says yo, I'm not sure if I want to do this, which is sort of painting a larger target on Jamal's back.
Yeah, I think it's the last time it seemed like Nora was the definite vote out. She wasn't, for basically the same reason. Everyone was kind of like, well, she's crazy, but nah. But I think everyone seemed really opposed to giving Jamal his way, just because they were like, it's a power move for Jamal, not necessarily a good move for us. So I think that's definitely what the point of contention is going to be. If purple does stay together and if purple does go to tribal council next time. So
yeah, I think it's interesting because I think it's good for Jamal. He says that he wants to have agency. He wants to make his own moves. That's all great. But I think after you were just blindsided, and even if everyone else is playing it off, oh, we just didn't like Molly. She was super schemy kind of thing. When you are on the 3-person alliance that just got blindsided, I feel like you don't necessarily have that much social capital to be swaying the vote the next week in the way that you want it to go, because everyone just voted against you. 3 days ago. So I think maybe it'll be interesting to see if Jamal can get his way, but I feel like Jamal trying to push for his way after he was just blindsided paints a larger target on his back. Like we see, he wants to push it onto Dan for Dan to go home because he doesn't want to vote Nora out. And then Janet and Tommy are talking and they're like, oh, that's sort of sketchy. Jamal is dangerous, kind of thing. So it's interesting because I think smart move would be to vote Jamal out because he's more sketchy, but he doesn't have a lot of social capital, it seems, at this point.
Yeah, but he's also the person who I think is very likely to flip on
Yeah.
purple if when there's a merge, if he makes it to the merge. So I would be interested to see how that changes people's voting strategy. So
Because I think it, like, you know, Nora will probably stick with the group, similar to someone like Dan. They don't really have many places to go. But I think with Jamal, he's a good talker. He seems like he's friendly. And you burn him over once, he'd be the first person probably to flip on you come a tribe swap, which I think this kind of narrative goes into why Vince was voted out this time, because you can't necessarily screw over Aaron twice as the females alliance and then like he's going to totally flip on you next week kind of thing. So Jamal, maybe he's focusing too much on the whole I'm the swing vote now because you all just screwed me over. I'm playing the middle, but there's not really a middle to play because it's 7-2 right now. So I think that's where maybe if he gets voted out soon, that's where he's faltering because he thinks he's the middle when he's actually not, and he doesn't have enough social capital to sway any votes.
yeah, and I think also holding a grudge isn't going to help you out very much at this point in the game because you still have a lot of game left to get through. And the person you're holding a grudge against might be the only person who can keep you in the game. So I don't think Jamal's prospects look very good.
Yeah, so I think that was interesting to see. And also from the, I guess, going to the other tribe, we see some from Karishma, who she didn't have a very large episode during the second week, but the first week she had some talking time. So if you follow like who gets to talk and whatnot, then she's in the middle now, sort of similar to Dean, who finally talked. But Karishma, I thought it was really interesting how she was talking about her Indian culture. I really like that they kept that in the episode because I feel like we just don't hear a lot about people's backstories or like what they're comfortable with. So I'm glad it wasn't like edited out of the episode.
I think it's kind of bad though because it was used kind of as a like, this is what's making me different from the rest of the tribe thing. And then, like, I don't think Karishma was painted in a very positive light this episode because she was kind of negative the whole time. She was like, I'm going to flip on my tribe as soon as I get the chance. And, like, it just wasn't, I think, a good look for her, especially because, like, she's in a solid majority alliance and she's, like, making complaints about the state of her game. And it's like,
Yeah,
eh.
I guess I agree. I feel like even though she did get screen time, some of the stuff, like you're saying, was sort of negative when she's complaining, or she wouldn't give Vince a name and she's sort of dead in the water kind of thing. And then at Tribal, when she brings up like, oh, I'm out on the outside of your sorority kind of thing, I don't necessarily fit in. But I'm glad that we get, I don't know, like I thought it was interesting when she brought up her culture because then we can sort of see like, oh, she doesn't fit in because of XYZ rather than like seeing her complain about not fitting in but not necessarily knowing why. So I think like that part was interesting, but I think, I don't know, I would be interested to see if Karishma can sort of get out of this hole that she's in, because just bringing up at Tribal too that you feel on the outside of the sorority girls, I don't really know if they want to work with you after that, because then they know that you know that you're on the outside of their threesome versus before you could sort of play it off like even though they know that you're at the bottom, maybe you don't know that, and so they'd keep you along.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like they didn't know that she was uncomfortable because she didn't express that she was uncomfortable until tribal. Like the whole thing with the hand, there's no excuse for one of them like not going to like comfort her. But the whole like playing in the water thing together, it's like that's a normal thing to do. They couldn't have known that it made her uncomfortable unless she said something. So I don't know. Some of it definitely is cultural, but I feel like a lot of what she's doing also seems kind of like self-inflicted. Like when she was like, "Oh, I'm older than the rest of you." It's like that only has to be a factor if you make it a factor. And it didn't seem like anyone was like, "Oh, Karishma's the oldest woman, so we have to like get rid of her." So,
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It seems like she's semi paranoid neurotic, similar to like Nora or Jason, where they small things sort of become very big on the island. And so it could just be like she's getting into her own head. She feels like she doesn't fit in, and then it comes off as like really forward, trying to fit in, really forward, like not fitting in, but like it also could just be that's the edit that we're seeing, and they spliced together a bunch of things where she's saying that she doesn't feel comfortable or doesn't fit in, but like in reality it's totally fine, but it's just like magnifying itself tenfold when it's on the island and you have nothing to do but like hang out with the
worry.
people that you don't like. Yeah. And yeah, with the finger thing, I felt bad. I was like, oh, even though I don't know, it's like no one came to her aid. And even though people are like, oh, it's no big deal, like it could be the angle of the camera that like it looked like it wasn't a lot of blood or whatever. But dude, she's bleeding and everyone was like chomping away 2 feet away from her.
I think it's also like some people also get very like squeamish around blood, so it could be that like one of them is like, "Whoa, I really don't like blood, so I'm not gonna make myself puke by going over there or whatever." But yeah, like I said, there's not an excuse for her entire tribe ignoring her.
Yeah, and so I think that'll be interesting if that narrative continues. I sort of want to see Karishma like come back from this and be able to middle finger everyone else that she feels is like making her on the outside. Whether it's intentional or not, I think that would be interesting to see more of. Um, for example, are people purposely trying to make her on the outs because of cultural differences, because she looks different, because she's older, or is it like her magnifying something that isn't necessarily there? I would be interested in learning more about.
Yeah, and I think also my thought totally flew out of my head. I'm upset now. Oh yeah, what Vince was saying about how I don't think that Karishma will be able to come back and screw everyone over because Vince was talking to her about like, oh, you got to throw out a name, and she just wouldn't throw out a name. She was just like, I'm here to play. I'll do whoever. It's like, bruh, bruh. If you're gonna be successful as Survivor, when someone asks you for a name repeatedly, just give them a name. Give them a
Yeah,
name that isn't their name and talk about it.
yeah, I think hopefully she's just learning and maybe she can come back from this. Otherwise, maybe that's why she's not getting a lot of confessionals, because she's going to be drawing dead in the water. Women's Alliance. Also, we see a little bit this episode. It's 4 men, 5 women, and we see the 4 men huddled. Aaron wants or notices that, like, oh, it's 5v4 right now, kind of thing. We need to get on this. And then I was thinking, like, what the heck? Vince is never going to be a bro with you all. Like, what is this? And so that's why I was really surprised when Vince got voted out, because just thinking about it, Vince seems like he was in with numerous of the females. So we just didn't see anything of like people thinking Vince was sketchy, because from the first episode, like Vince was the number 6 or 7 after Tom in that women's alliance. So I was like, wait, why is Vince going?
Yeah, it sounded like none of them wanted Vince to go, but at the same time, it's kind of good for them
Yeah.
because the guys are now down 5-3. So,
Speaking of Vince, we can get more into it at Tribal Council, because I also do believe that voting Vince out is the better move. But Dean, he gets his first confessional.
Dean, okay, so Vince goes to the island of the idols, which we're also going to talk about. And then when everyone else is at the beach, he's like, well, he might come back with an idol, so you got to split the vote. And then I don't know who said this, but someone was like, dude, we're all here. So poor Dean looked like such a dumbass because he said, okay, we're going to split the vote with literally everyone present. So
So then it's
now,
like, oh, thanks, dude. He's there. One of us is going to get the votes split on us, so one of us is screwed.
yeah, basically. And then I think that kind of highlighted Karishma's paranoia because she was like,
Mm,
if votes are split, it's going to be split for me. So,
yeah. And Dean, maybe he gets voted out next week because of his showmance with Chelsea on the preview for next week. Or I think there could be a tribe swap because Vince, we did not see at Island of the Idols pick the name for the next person to go. So it could be something happening, or maybe they're switching to like, you have to pick someone on your tribe to go because in the preview as well, was it like Elizabeth or Kelly saying like, oh, we need to pick someone smart, or it's strategic now because they can come and blow up my game. So it's changing, it seems like.
yeah. And I'm excited that it's changing just because I think Rachel and I have talked in previous podcasts about how, like, the randomly selecting
Yeah.
thing is it's just random, and I don't like that it takes like an element of strategy out of the game, especially because it's like the person who goes there gets information, gets a chance at an idol, and it's a lot to give someone just based on whether or not their name got picked out of a hat.
Yeah, I think the strategic aspect, if it does become like an Exile Island thing where winning tribe votes someone from losing tribe or losing tribe votes someone from winning tribe to go to the Island of the Idols each week, adds a lot more of a strategic element to it. Because, like Exile Island, all of those islands where that's where the idols are, you typically use strategy to either send people that you want to find idols and keep the people you don't want to find idols back at camp so they aren't getting advantages in the game.
Yeah. And I think also for Kelly and Elizabeth, it's like for them, it's in their interest to keep the pool of people who have gone to Island of the Idols small, because the more people that know that Rob and Sandra are there, the more like dangerous it is. Because like knowledge is power, and the more people that have knowledge, the more diluted that power is. So
Yeah, and Island of the Idols, this time at least we didn't waste time on Rob and Sandra reading the stupid note card of like, this is what Island of the Idols is. We don't vote. We don't do anything. We sit here and just give you mentorship, whatever. But then every single episode we've seen so far, they waste like 30 seconds to a minute of the person walking up, of the person giving a confessional, like, oh my God, Boston Rob, Sandra, I love you so much. And I'm like, oh my God, we're going to see this every single week where someone's going to have the exact same, oh my God, reaction to Boston Rob and Sandra there. And it's like, we get it. Everyone is going to be wowed about it. Unless someone's like screaming, having a fit, crying, jumping up and down, like they're all going to have the same freaking reaction to these people.
yeah. And that's also kind of the reason I'm hoping that someone gets to go twice, because then it won't be like, oh my God, Buster, Rob, and Sandra. It'll be like, hey guys, I'm back. What's up? So,
Yeah, waste my editing time, 2K19. Like, just cut it out.
yeah. And then I feel kind of bad for Vince because he like goes to the island of the idols. He cries about how much like watching Sandra and Buster Rob has meant to him. He wins the challenge even though he didn't get fire. And then he gets voted out with an idol in his pocket.
I am like, what the heck was this challenge?
I'm
What
kind of
even?
mad because I feel like him getting ashes wasn't as difficult as him getting fire. Because it's like if someone had woken up and seen like a torch walking down the path, that would have been a lot more conspicuous than just Vince creeping back through the jungle again.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. Okay, yeah, being stealthy, being under pressure, going in, whatever. But like this was just so weird. It wasted 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes of the episode to watch him do stealth mode, creeping through a freaking pitch black forest where we can't even see anything anyways. And then like I don't know. I was like, they're just wasting so much time on this. Like, yeah, sure, it was exhilarating to watch the first time, but the second time around, when I was rewatching the episode to do the podcast, I just skipped it because I was like, we already know the outcome. Like, who really cares to watch him crawl on the freaking floor?
And it was even worse since Vince gets voted out. So it's like we just wasted like 30 minutes of screen time on a player we're never going to see again.
Yeah, like it was fun to watch, but I think in longevity, it's not a fun scene. It wasted a lot of the episode time of them chatting, and I was just surprised that he accepted the challenge so quick. Like Boston Rob said, you're going into the other person's camp and you're going to have to steal fire, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I was like, wait, shouldn't you ask for clarification or like something? You're literally being dropped in a beach where you freaking don't know where you are. I think he just accepted the thing too fast. And like, sure, it played out and he did get an idol, but it just seems stupid.
Yeah, I feel like the survivors definitely need to be better about like asking Boston Rob and Sandra to like sweeten the pot, especially doing something like stealing fire from another camp.
Yeah, someplace you've never been before in the freaking pitch black. I'm like, what if the cameramen give it away and people notice something's happening because there's just more people watching you while you sleep this episode or this night versus other nights when maybe they only have one camera person watching and now there's like 3 different angles of people watching you at night. Then you know something's up.
Yeah, and it's fine. Vince got his ashes. I can't believe he used his water bottle for it.
That's
Like that's a
gross.
little gross. He got his ashes. He got his idol. He goes back, and we don't really see the like aftermath of him coming back to the island. It just goes basically straight into the immunity
Yeah.
challenge.
See, and this is where I wish we got some more, cut the Island of the Idols segment in half, have more of the tribe time. Like, what did Vince explain to the rest of the tribe? What he had to do when him and Elizabeth talked? Did they form a pact that they need to keep each other safe? Or were they like, oh, you're super schemy? Did one of them want to blow up the other person's game or not? Like, we did not see any of this, and maybe it's because Vince gets voted out right after, so it's not necessarily that important, but I think it's just interesting to see. And like they have articles now of exit interviews with Vince saying like him and Elizabeth, yes, they did have a talk, and like how he explained the Island of the Idols to the rest of the tribe. But like that's just something I would have been interested in seeing on the episode.
Yeah, and I think that would have given us more insight maybe to why Vince got voted out. Because if Elizabeth was like, oh, Vince is trying to blow up my game, I'm going to convince the other girls like to vote for him. That gives us a much more cohesive story than people just voting him out because he might have an idol.
Yeah. So I think like just lack of information in that regard, I would have liked to see more there. Hopefully, when another person does go to the Island of the Idols and they aren't voted out right after, we do see them talk to Elizabeth or talk to Kelly about like, yo, are we creating a pact about this? Like, what's our plan? Or is it, yo, I need to vote this other person out because they potentially could have an idol that lasts up to 3 tribal councils kind of thing. And so maybe it was cut out because Vince got voted out, but like that's the interesting stuff I want to see. I don't want to see Vince crawl on the floor.
Yeah, and then before the vote out, because Orange lost the immunity challenge because Karishma and Dean sucked so bad at the puzzle.
It was
Like,
a cool challenge.
I really liked the teeter-totter thing.
Yeah, I was sad that like Jeff didn't say, "Come on in, guys," and like, "Oh, Molly was voted out last time," because I like seeing their reactions to the person that gets voted out. So I was sad that that was cut from the episode. But yeah, it was a cool challenge. I feel like Janet held her ground against an Olympic swimmer. So like good for Janet, even though she was slower. But yeah, Dean and Karishma, not a good episode. Dean, his first confessional, and it's a confessional where he goofs up and then they screw up the puzzle like so bad. But it looked like a hard puzzle, so
Yeah, but then they come back, and it seems like the plan is Karishma from all of the stuff that we see like before Tribal Council, because I think we got confessionals or voiceovers from 3 I think 3 of the women saying like, "This is why I want to keep Vince." And yeah.
Yeah, see, I was surprised that it actually ended up being Vince because it seemed like Vince plus the 5 women were a lot closer than Dean and Aaron are to the women. I'm like Tom, I could see in the 6, in the 7 of like Dean or of Tom, Vince, and the women. That's like a core 7. Did they just not vote Aaron and Dean out because they're strong young guys? I could see Aaron and Missy having a relationship from what we saw last episode. But like Dean, we have not seen any of, which makes it interesting. Like, why are they voting Vince out? Even though I think Vince would not have flipped on the women because he was their number 6, number 7 with Tom.
Yeah, but I think it's also voting Vince out was good because he could very easily become a liability. Like they might have seen him talking with the guys and been like, "What's up with that?" Or they might have figured out that he had an idol and been like, "We just want to flush the idol out of the game." So I don't think that voting out Vince was necessarily a wrong choice. I just think it was not the best choice they could have made, maybe, depending on what information we weren't shown.
No, yeah, I think voting out Vince was the good choice. I could see why they didn't go with the Tom plan because Elaine and Elizabeth got some talking points. Like they like Tom, Tom's the dad. They don't want to vote out Tom, kind of thing. So I can get that. But for the other ones, I'm like, oh, what are we not seeing on the screen that makes Vince getting voted out for, like first over Aaron and Dean, who we haven't seen them create much bonds with the women. But I think voting out Vince, yeah, it's a smart move. You know, with the tribe swap coming up, I feel like as the female alliance, you cannot alienate the men again and then switch the vote and vote out Tom, because then you go into a tribe swap potentially next week with Dean and Aaron being super pissed off at you. And if it's going into threes, which it potentially could be, and it's like 5 or 6 people on a tribe, chances are you might get stuck like a 3-2 minority because you've been to more tribal councils, and then you're stuck with Aaron or Dean, who is very well going to throw you under the bus because you, as the Women's Alliance, blindsided them multiple times. And so they would definitely flop come next vote if there is a swap. And so I think, Vince, if he did play his idol, Karishma goes, that's also fine. You go with the plan that the men set, and you don't alienate Aaron and Dean further. So that's why I think Vince makes sense, because he's sneakier and you're not alienating the men. So like it's a smart move, but we didn't see enough with the edit to sort of warrant it on the face level. Like we had to think about this to see like, oh, it's smart, but like a casual viewer, I would have been very confused.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that maybe next episode we get to see some of the tribal aftermath, and then that helps clarify things for like the casual viewer. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like more information. Why didn't Vince play his idol? We did not hear. Maybe Vince just felt super, super comfortable with the women, but like, I don't know. We didn't
He
see enough.
said in his what do you call it? His outro thing, that he brought the idol, but it sounds like he didn't bring the rest of his stuff. So he must have been feeling real confident.
Yeah, so it's all good. Like, sure, the viewer is blindsided. Oh, is Vince going to play the idol? Is Karishma going home? Is Tom going home? Yay. But I think I just need more information to connect the dots, because you have, 72 hours of footage into a 42-minute episode. Like, sure, yeah, things are going to get cut. But I don't know. This vote was just sort of confusing because we didn't see a lot of like why this is happening.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm hoping that things will become clear in retrospect, and if not, then this was just a sloppily edited episode. So, or not
Yeah.
even sloppily edited. I would say it's a really interesting edit because we kind of see things all from Vince's perspective almost. Like we see why Vince was so convinced that he would stay, because it was like, oh, I'm really close with these girls. Oh, Karishma seems to be on the outs because of her like puzzle stuff and because she doesn't seem to really like the other girls. And so you see why Vince might be persuaded not to play the idol, but you don't really see him seeing that, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, and with Vince voting Tom, Elizabeth knows that Vince won an idol at Island of the Idols because otherwise he would have lost his vote. So Elizabeth at least has an upper hand, like, yo, I flushed an idol and you get rid of someone who has gone to Island of the Idols. So, like, Vince can't rat Elizabeth out about lying the first week because he's gone. So I think for Elizabeth, voting Vince out is a good move because you could flush an idol and she knows that they did flush an idol, and you get rid of someone who can blow your game up in the future for lying about what's out there. But we didn't see any of that on the episode, so we could just be speculating up the wazoo, and this was not in anyone's minds when they voted Vince out, and they just solely did it because Aaron had the idea to do it. But I don't know. Hopefully we see next week some of the aftermath, but I doubt it.
yeah. So, like we said, we're going to be talking again next week about next week's episode. Let us know in the comments down below if you think voting out Vince was a good idea. And if you don't think voting Vince out was a good idea, who do you think should have gone instead? Do you think that Elizabeth and Kelly are going to have to make a pact about the Island of the Idols? What's going to go on with that? So just let us know your feelings in the comments down below, because we love hearing what you guys have to say, because we're only two people, and the more thoughts we hear, the more educated we are. So,
yeah. So thank you all so much for watching. We really appreciate it. And we will see you all next week with a brand new podcast update.